Hi everyone, and welcome back to Facebook Live. Today we're talking about Voice Biometrics. Hi Teresa.
Hi Windsor.
Good to see you again. Welcome. So yeah, today I want to talk about a major bank here in the US that went live and went through a deployment of Voice Biometrics for authentication in their contact center and their IVR. So Teresa, you just spent 3 days there on site. What did you think?
It was really exciting. We had a fantastic first day. They had 75% consent rate, which is spectacular. That means 8 out of 10 customers opted in to use their voice for authentication purposes. There was tremendous buzz all the way from the agents, the supervisors of the agents, on up to the executives.
Yeah, and what made them special? I mean, 8 out of 10 people who call in, who opt in to use Voice Biometrics to safeguard their information and to keep fraudsters from being doing account takeover and impersonating them. What do you think worked there? I mean, it sounds like there was a really strong key sponsor who allowed us to come in and really partner. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of elements to success, right? There was commitment not only from NICE, but from the customer. We had a fantastic sponsor. We had a great team of individuals on both sides working together. We assembled what were the best practices from the consent strategy. But the other aspect of this was the training. All of the agents were trained prior to go live, and they knew exactly what they had practiced with the agents. Supervisors sat with them during the go live. It was a very hands-on experience. The call flows were well developed and well thought out. So everything flowed. There was an API driven screen pop for the agents, and so they couldn't they had to adhere to the consent scripts. Everything was just very well thought out, well planned, and executed to perfection, which is why day one, 75% is absolutely fantastic. Remarkable.
Yeah, it's a very strong start to this deployment.
And it's getting better, right, every day.
You know, I know in the conversation with your sponsor there, he had mentioned that this is a technology that really addresses the agent's needs versus an imposed technology that, you know, the organization needs the agent. Can you talk about what you were thinking?
Yeah, so there were a couple things. I mean, I had some, conversations with people just about how exciting everything was. And one of the things that they mentioned was that typically when technology or software is rolled out for the agents, it's something that's put on them. It doesn't necessarily, it's supposed to make their lives better, but it doesn't really, right? Okay, we upgraded our CRM, or now we have the ability to remove one click from your process. This is something that created tremendous buzz, excitement from the agent's perspective. It was innovative. They've always felt like, just generally speaking, that they were behind the curve, and now they feel like they're on that early adopter curve, right? So it's taking them to the next level. It's having a significant impact on the CX already. I've experienced the authentications within the same day, the next day authentications, meaning that the caller calls in and actually was able to authenticate with their voice instead of having to answer the manual authentication questions. So just everyone is excited about this. The agents love it, and the customers are, of all ages. I experienced, date of birth is one of the authentication questions, right? Or one of the manual questions. And so this was ages, 80 to 20-year-olds saying, yeah, sure, why not? For the consent.
Also, I would imagine these agents who have had to rely on manual-based authentication questions, asking the caller mother's maiden name, what street you grew up on, those sort of things. I mean, now this really empowers them and gives them the confidence level to know that they are, in fact, talking to the legitimate customer and not a fraudster. So knowing that for certain it takes a lot of burden off the agent. Also, what happened with this really high enrollment rate as it relates to the CSAT or the NPS score? Was there any bump in that in just a short time?
So unfortunately, we didn't actually see a CSAT bump yet, but that is something that they are looking at very closely. They're going to be reporting on it, and I think we're going to get a report back out on that next week.
Yeah, typically organizations we find get an increase in anywhere in like 5 points on their NPS score as a result of the customer feeling like the organization has taken the responsibility to safeguard their information, that they feel like the security of their information and their account is really important to the organization. So that's interesting. We'll keep track of that and see how things are going. But you were there 2 or 3 days. What was it like on day one as far as like a fraud side? So I know we reduced average handle time and eliminated that whole process of agents having to ask a series of manual-based questions. But from a fraud perspective, what happened there?
So this is really awesome. This bank does screen recordings. So we actually got to listen and watch exactly what happened for the entire call. And we have a feature in our voice biometric technology called the known fraudster watch list. So what we do is we take calls that have been flagged by your fraud department, and we can create voice prints of fraudsters for this watch list. Then every call that comes into the contact center is scanned to see if the voice on the call is one of the known fraudsters. And the agent got a known fraudster. It popped up. She
what did she do? What was her face like?
She put the caller on hold and stood up and did like a dance and called her supervisor. I got one. Yeah. So it was thrilling, right? So all of us were thrilled. We didn't expect to catch someone on day 1 and day 2 and day 3. So it's already working, which is absolutely fantastic. This particular, the call that I reviewed, this fraudster knew all of the authentication questions, knew the account number, first name, last name, date of birth. They had everything that they needed. They did misspell the last name, but something like that could be very easily missed by an agent, right, who's trying to service a customer. And that is something that we noticed in the call. So the great thing about the voice bio is you're not relying on the agents as your first line of defense. You're putting something in place that automates that for them. They don't have that burden any longer.
And knowing exactly that it is a fraudster, indeed a fraudster on the phone, they can be a little more suspicious of the questions and how they answer, which was exactly what happened in the review. The notification came up that this was a known fraudster on the line, who had actually historically, after the call, they found out that he had transacted and done account takeover and withdrew money on a number of occasions prior to implementing voice biometrics. So he was a successful fraudster calling back. Now that the agent knew that he was a known fraudster and denied service, that person won't be able to access any more accounts. So the agent followed the procedure for fraud for the organization, and the risk department reached out to the actual legitimate customer and said, hey, just wanted to let you know that your information is available out there on the dark web for sale. A fraudster had purchased your information and tried to access your account, and we denied them service. So that was a really positive message. We see fraudsters today. There's really 2 approaches. They try to remove small amounts of money so that the account owner really doesn't know, or they're not tipped off by it. And that's really widespread type of strategy that they use. They call in a lot of different accounts and they remove little bits of money. And then we have the targeted approach that fraudsters use, where they attack one account specifically, and they'll call in repeatedly over a few set of days, and that's to remove obviously a larger sum of money. But the owners of these accounts have no idea. And so that is a great message to be able, this organization, to reach out to the customer and say we denied service because we caught that fraudster, and you're not going to be inconvenienced to try and put back that money or anything like that. So if you're a bank, or you're an insurance company, or perhaps a telco or healthcare provider, you don't want to wait till your customers call you you in fact want to be proactive about that, right? You don't want to be notified by your customer because you're putting that customer at risk. You're putting yourself at risk for losing them as a customer. You're putting yourself at risk for being fined by the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission. That recently announced that they're issuing fines to companies called the Red Flags Rule. You can look it up. It's the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, and are now issuing fines to companies that haven't updated their identity theft protection programs in the voice channel. So if account takeover is happening within your contact centers, it's very possible this could be something you'll have to address. So losing customers, being fined, and then also your brand reputation in general for knowing that customers or fraudsters can hijack and do account takeover. That is a big risk and a terrible message for your customers to know. So at NICE, we had noticed that in the marketplace there was a tremendous need for identifying unknown fraudsters. And so we did an innovation recently. We call this proactive fraud prevention. We call the feature proactive fraudster exposure. And what that actually does is it groups calls together and says this voice is coming across numerous different accounts and says you need to look at these. So Teresa, why don't you tell us a little bit about how it actually works and how we innovated in this area?
Sure. So it's like you said, it's proactive fraudster exposure, and NICE uses our best in breed analytics together with deep neural network technology for Voice Biometrics.
Okay.
And so that sounds really fancy, but ultimately it's pretty simple. In the past, you would have to manually listen to calls to try and find the same voice calling in across different accounts. Not only is that incredibly time consuming, it's fraught with error. You have to try and remember, did I hear this voice? Is it the same voice as that voice? And I got to go listen to this other call again. Okay. Impossible. No one does it. No one does it. Okay. Because it's just impossible. So what we do is we take that manual listening completely out of the process and we automate it. We're going to help you find the needles in the haystack, right? So you've got this massive number of calls, and over up to a 90-day window, we'll listen to all the calls that come into the contact center and find the same voices that are showing up on different accounts. Now, it's conceivable that someone may have multiple accounts. So if they do, you can add them to the whitelist. But 99% of the time, this is going to be fraudulent activity. So these calls are then put into clusters that your fraud team can listen. Now like I said, needle in a haystack, right? We're taking all those specific calls. So you're no longer listening to hundreds of thousands of calls. You're listening to maybe
2 or 3
20 or 30
for each case.
Exactly. So you're listening to those, and then you, with a click of a button, you add that voice print to the watch list. The watch list then prevents this caller from getting past the agent.
That's
right. So it's going to flag them the next time that they call in.
I mean, departments just don't have the bandwidth to listen proactively, even calls that are tagged from agents. If an agent says, I think this is a suspicious caller, please listen to it. There's just too many of them, and it's completely ineffective. We know with the fraudsters that we've listened to, they have the answers to all the questions. They pass all of this. It's truly their voice that is unique that we all have.
They actually pass the questions a higher percentage of the time than your actual customers pass the questions.
Right. I read 30% of legitimate users, we fail our own security questions because we're challenged to remember an address we lived at 3 addresses ago. But I assure you that fraudster who has purchased that information online will pass that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you could continue to speak with us. We'd love to continue the conversation. Many of you know that if you haven't looked at our website, you've probably seen this, but we have our annual user conference. It's coming up this year. It's the week of April 15th. And our interactions conference is in Vegas this year. And Who are you more interested in talking to there?
Well,
Gordon Ramsay or is it Ashton Kutcher? Who are you more interested in listening?
I like them both, but I would definitely want to speak to Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon
Sorry,
Ramsay.
Ashton. Sorry. Don't watch this.
I'm sure he'll have his own line of followers. So here at Interactions, when we go there, you'll see that we have at least 4 breakout sessions for real-time authentication for Voice Biometrics, right? We're gonna have these 4 different breakout sessions, and you'll be able to hear our customers who have this technology. They'll talk about how they got buy-in internally to get it budgeted, to get it brought in. You'll get to hear why and how certain organizations picked the consent strategy that they used and the results they got from enrollment and authentication rates, all directly from our customers. And we can continue the conversation then. Thanks everyone for joining. Windsor and Teresa, talk to you soon. Have a great Friday.